Go.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming. My name is Mary Cook, and I'm here to talk about recovery coaches as key players. But before I get started, I want to say a few things. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank Lori and the group for allowing me to be part of this process of the pop-up. The last year has been incredibly gratifying in terms of all the people I've met, doing wonderful things in the areas of substance use. And I believe I've created relationships that are going to go forward, both professionally and personally. And I'm so grateful to be here, so thank you for that. The other thing I want to say is I'm really excited to be here because I am so passionate about recovery. I'm passionate about recovery from substance use. I'm passionate about recovery from mental health issues. I'm passionate about recovery. And I've just seen it transform lives, transform families, both professionally and personally. So I'm really happy to be here and be able to talk about that. So, recovery coaches as key players. I'm part of the pop-up because I work at the School of Social Work, School of Social Work, under the Addiction Research Institute. And there are two projects that are related to the pop-up. One is the South-Southwest Addiction Technology Transfer Center. I'm not moving yet. And the other one is the Recovery Support Services. The South-Southwest Addiction Technology Transfer Center is a SAMHSA federally funded program. There's 10 addiction technology transfer centers across the United States. And the technology transfer has to do with transferring the information about best practices and evidence-based practices to the field of substance use disorders and recovery. We represent Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Oh, Louisiana, thank you, 5 states. And I did bring some brochures, and I actually left a few over there about if anybody else is interested in learning more about that. The other reason I'm here is because I work on a different project called the Recovery Support Services Project. And that's probably the most relevant reason why I'm here. And my main work, and I'll talk about this later, is to handle the database that tracks information and trainings for recovery coaches, trainers of coaches, and trainers of trainerships. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, but I do want to say, I have worked in the field of recovery support services since 2014 in that capacity, but I have never worked as a recovery coach, and I'm so happy to see people that do work with recovery coaches. So please feel free to add anything. And I've never worked in an agency that provides recovery support services. So, okay, the first background that I want to talk about the recovery support services in Texas. Change this. There we go. I'm not going to talk about the Ross Initiative, just a matter of time, but I am going to talk about in 2014, Texas Health and Human Services Commission created an RFP for about $5 million to offer to organizations across the state of Texas who offer recovery support services. And recovery coaches are a part of recovery support services. There were 22 agencies and organizations across the state of Texas that were funded. 2 of them are recovery community organizations, and one's represented here, Communities for Recovery, and the other one is APA in Dallas, which is the Association for Persons Affected by Addiction. And the rest of the 22 organizations are treatment centers and other community-based organizations. And the whole recovery support services, I want to call it a movement, that's probably not the right word, but from the state, is that the right word? Okay. Was a move by the state to support moving from an acute care model of substance use disorder treatment and recovery to a chronic care model. And the acute care model is crisis, detox, 30, 60, 90 days in treatment, and then aftercare. The chronic care model is embedding recovery support services, individualized services for people to help them initiate, maintain, and continue their recovery. So it's a totally different model. It's much like chronic medical issues such as diabetes and hypertension. I don't know what I'm doing. There, okay. So HHSC, for the Recovery Support Services project, contracted with the School of Social Work, the Addiction Research Institute, to provide 2 major deliverables. One is the evaluation. I'll be talking about that and later on in the presentation. I did not have day-to-day experience working with that, but I am part of that team. And the other major deliverable was to create and administer a database for recovery coaches, trainers of coaches, and trainers of trainers. And that I'm the main administrator for that database. Okay, another thing I want to say, this pop-up has to do with youth primarily, right? One of the things about the database is it's for, yes, yay for youth. Fortunately, the database tracks information about trainers of coaches, recovery coaches who work with adults. I know that recovery coaches who get the training go and work with youth, but that's not what we track. Okay, there are other separate youth programs that I'll talk about a little bit further on. Okay, so what is a recovery coach? A recovery coach is a peer with lived experience. That's the most important aspect of what a recovery coach brings to the table. A recovery coach receives training and education to connect others, to individualize sources of recovery. And recovery coaches, as I mentioned before, are a recovery support services. So part of the recovery support services grant, a major part of that was providing recovery coaches in these 22 organizations. Example of other recovery support services include education, training, assistance with housing and food, sober social activities, and employment. Recovery coaches advocate. They connect persons to real and potential communities of recovery support. They're a role model, and that's so important in early recovery. They're a cheerleader and they're a motivator. A recovery coach is person-centered, focused on the individual and what that individual needs to continue to initiate the recovery, continue their recovery. It's a long-term process. Recovery coach is strength-based. And for instance, there are recovery plans developed instead of treatment plans. A recovery coach honors all pathways to recovery, even if it's a path of recovery that the recovery coach didn't go through him or herself. And I won't go into that now, but you all probably all heard of MAT treatment, medication-assisted treatment, and that's really something that's being challenged, looking at recovery in terms of honoring all pathways. The relationship is non-authoritarian and based on mutuality, and it's recovery-oriented and it's best trauma-informed. A recovery coach, and Bill White talks about this a lot, is not a sponsor, a clinician, a doctor, or clergy. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Recovery coaches are in many different settings. Their exact role depends on where they're located. They're in substance use treatment centers, recovery community organizations, collegiate recovery programs, yay, and local mental health agencies, and local behavioral health agencies, integrated care clinics, EMS, emergency rooms, hospitals, and police stations. They're all over. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about role clarity between recovery coaches, clinicians, and sponsors. It can be kind of confusing to someone, especially someone kind of not outside the field or not involved in the 12-step program, what the differences are. I got a lot of this information from Bill White's articles, but these are just a few of the differences. So a recovery coach helps peer access resources, is an advocate, is a role model, and discloses recovery status, open about being in recovery. A clinician primarily, again, these are all generalizations, works from a medical model, may diagnose, as a role is primarily based on training, and recovery, being in recovery is not necessary. A sponsor helps the sponsee work the steps, discloses recovery status, and is bound by the 12-step traditions. And unfortunately, Sarah Castedo couldn't be here today, but she wrote an excellent report for her placement this semester, and it's called Peer Recovery Supports Services in Texas, an Overview. And it was amazing. It was very well written and it was very thorough. And one of the things she said about peer recovery support services and recovery coaches is that recovery coaches help to bridge the gap between the clinical realm and the realm of mutual aid. And I really like that description. That makes it visual for me. Recovery coach training in Texas. Okay, the first thing that I want to say is that there are other recovery coach trainings available. It's not just the HHSC 46-hour training. There are other curriculums available, but that's the curriculum that we track. The people who get trained on the 46-hour curriculum from the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. If you work in an HHSC funded program, you do have to get that training, that 46-hour training. Okay, saying all that, oh, and I want to say a little bit about what the domains of the training are. So it's 46 hours, there's 10 hours in mentoring and education, 10 hours in advocacy, 10 hours in recovery wellness, 10 hours in recovery support, and 16 hours in ethical responsibility. Okay, so this could all change with House Bill 1486, which is a bill that was passed during the last session to allow for reimbursement for recovery support services, including recovery coaches through Medicaid. And some people in this room may know more than I do about it, so feel free to add, but there's a rules committee meeting right now, and I know one of the things they're discussing is the potential of blending the best parts of the recovery coach training with Via Hope's mental health peer training. So that may actually happen. So this training information may be out of date very soon. Okay. So the next step, if a recovery coach wants to go in that direction, is a certification through the Texas Certification Board of Addiction Professionals. You don't have to go through the HHSC training, but you do have to go through a training that has the same domains. A person has to have, after that, has to have 25 hours of supervised work experience, 500 hours of volunteer or paid work experience, and either take a test, and if you pass, you're certified. There's also the opportunity to be designated and not certified if you don't want to take a test. But I do know that with and you guys may know more specifics about this actually, that if you're HHSC funded program, at some point, if you're a recovery coach, in order for your agency or to be reimbursed, you're going to have to be certified. That's correct, right? Okay. All right. So the database that I'm the main administrator for, I'm just going to talk numbers for a minute. So with recovery coaches, the number that have gone through the 46-hour HHSC training is 2,380. Okay, something that I want to talk about here is that those 2,380 may not be practicing or may not even want to practice as a recovery coach. And the other issue is they may not be a peer. They do allow other people, clergy, community members, other people who want to learn about substance use disorders, recovery, and services to take the training. It's up to the particular agency to decide if they want someone that they hire as a recovery coach to be a peer or not. Generally, that's the case that they do. But, so this 2380 doesn't actually represent people in the field or people who even want to be in the field. Okay, the trainer of coaches are people who train the recovery coaches to be recovery coaches. There's 173 in the database, but approximately 78 are active. And there's 6 TOTs who can train the trainer of coaches and the recovery coaches. And even though there's 6, there's only one person that's really functioned as a TOT for the last few years, and that's Joseph Hogan Sanchez. He does most of those trainings. Okay, so recovery coaching and youth. I did a little research just to see what I could find out about what's actually available in terms of training or services for youth and recovery coaching. So, what I learned is that HHSC has funded 8 youth recovery community centers throughout the state of Texas. These are centers that engage youth after they exited residential treatment, substance use treatment, and they try to engage the families and the youth. And each site can hire up to 2 peer recovery coach leaders, is what they call them, recovery leaders, excuse me, ages 18 to 30. They have to have at least 6 months of sobriety. And so far that project has engaged 350 youth and families. The last I heard at a Texas TRI meeting was in Houston. They're going to be opening 3 public recovery high schools. And what I've understood is Unlimited Visions has their own curriculum, and they're going to be training the recovery coaches who work in that system. And then another youth peer recovery coach, this is a certification. I'm not sure if this is still active. It's still on the TCBAP website, but it's called Young Peer Mentor Certification through TCBAP and APA. And the reason I say I'm not sure, you guys may have more up-to-date information. At one point, I was supposed to track the people who went through that training, and then it just stopped, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. Okay, and just a few things. Oh, shit, I did it again. Okay, and I talked about the evaluation, and I want to talk a little bit about the results of the evaluation. So just a few results. So the Recovery Support Services final evaluation that was written and produced by the team that I work with at UT between May 1st, 2014 and 8/31/2016, 22 Texas RSS programs provided 86,000 hours of coaching and recovery support group services. This includes face-to-face, telephone, internet, and internet-based recovery coaching. By the way, I did bring a copy of the report, and it is available online if anybody would like to know where that is, I can tell you.
We can link it to your talk.
Oh, okay. Do you
We'll
know
do
where it is? Okay, sure.
We'll do that.
Link it to the top. Okay. Other evaluation results of those receiving long-term recovery coaching who completed the 3, 6, 9, and 12-month checkup interview, the housing status from 32 to 50% rose from 32% to 54% owned or rented their living quarters. So they, instead of living with a family member, living in a possibly a shelter, that went from 32 to 54%. Overall employment increased from 23% to 57%, and average monthly incomes of employed wages increased from $249 a month to $865 a month. And again, of those who completed those 3, 6, 9, and 12-month checkups, 83% were abstinent or reduced their substance use. And there was this is really amazing to me, 74% reduction in healthcare cost for the 1,123 individuals. And the healthcare costs included inpatient treatment, outpatient, and emergency rooms, with an estimated savings of over $3 million.
Can you say that again?
Wow.
Okay, yeah. So it's, oh, I forgot to, sorry. So the last point, is that what you're the most interested in? The last point?
Yes.
Okay, so there was a 74% reduction in healthcare costs for 1,123 individuals. Again, those are the ones that completed the 3, 6, 9, and 12-month recovery checkups. And the healthcare costs were inpatient, for outpatient, and in emergency rooms of an estimated savings of over $3 million. Yeah, that's awesome. So in summary, gosh, you're not even telling me I have 5 minutes left or anything. Okay.
You're good.
I'm good. Recovery coaching and other peer-based, including mental health services, are evolving and growing, changing all the time, growing all the time. I believe most likely will continue to play a key role in recovery from substance use disorders, as will peer workers on the mental health side. And one of the things that Bill White said in one of the articles that I read is that peer workers have been around, or peers have been around to help other peers. He talked about back when Native American culture used them. So it has existed forever. The names might change or the roles might change, but I think that aspect is here to stay. And to end, I just want to read something that I just saw this morning, that I just thought, oh, this is just perfect to end my talk. And this is what I hope for myself, and this is what I hope for others who are working in this field. And this was written by a man named John, I'm not even sure that I'm pronouncing his name right, but John O'Donoghue, who is from Ireland. He's dead now, but he was a priest, and he was like a spiritual leader, and I think sort of a mystic, actually. And this is something that was on a website that I read this morning. It said, "May you see what you do, the beauty of your own soul. May the sacredness of your work bring healing, light, and renewal to those who work with you and to those who see and receive your work. May your work never weary you." So with that,